When writing personal essays, there are a couple things you want to keep in mind. First, topic. So you have to make sure that your topic is tied to the prompt, whatever it is that it's asking you to do. So if you're writing an essay for a college application or something like that, it has to be tied to whatever it is they're asking specifically for you or from you. Think about what your passions are, what influenced those passions. Are there any stories from your life that show the deeper side of who you are? Something that is super impactful. The more impactful the story, the better. You don't want to make it something that's inconsequential, because then your entire essay is just not going to be as strong. Another good thing to have is an overarching motif or metaphor. A motif is a recurring topic or idea or something like that, and a metaphor obviously is something representing something else. So if you're going to use a motif or a metaphor, which I highly recommend, pick one and stick to it. You don't want to mix metaphors. That sends mixed messages. So if you're using sailing as a metaphor for life, don't all of a sudden put in there going on a hike, because it gets confusing and it takes away from your overall message. Try to make it connected to your overall message or theme. So if you're talking about failure and how your a learned failure helped you become the person that you are today, and you're using sailing, and you tell a story about when you failed while you were sailing, you can continue to use a sailing metaphor or the sailing motif in order to keep it connected and keep the message moving. And you want to make it compelling. So when we're talking about specific kinds of motifs or metaphors, you don't want them to be cliche or overly used, because then whoever's reading your essay, whether it's people on admissions board or something like that for college, or your teacher, it can get really boring, and all of a sudden your stuff just ends up going into a slush pile, and they're not really interested in what you have to say. Some strategies in general that you want to use no matter what kind of personal essay you're going to write. Use anecdotes as long as they have an impact. So personal stories, like I said earlier, if you have an awesome sailing story where you failed, but you became a better person because of it or something like that, those are the kind of stories you want to use. You don't want to use everyday stories, because again, it'll take away from the impact of your overall message. Use figurative language, but don't just plop it in there. You want to use it strategically. So imagery and personification and things like that, beautiful language can make an essay much more powerful, but you don't want to just plop in a piece of imagery because I tell you to. It should have a purpose behind it, and it should end up helping to further your message or your topic, whatever you're talking about. Change the pacing of your writing, especially depending on your topic. So, like I said, if you're telling a story about sailing and it's an exciting piece, you want your pacing to be faster. If it's when you're talking or reminiscing about the past, you're going to use a slower type pace. And so the way to do that, you'll use different kinds of syntax and paragraph structure. Syntax is sentence structure, so basically shorter sentences if you want faster pace, longer sentences if you want a slower pace. And then paragraph structure, a slower pace, you would want bigger paragraphs. If you want it to be read faster and therefore the pace is faster, you want shorter paragraphs. Even experiment with having a one-word sentence and a one-word paragraph and see what the impact is for that. Of course, you wouldn't want it to be any word. You would want it to be something that matters to your essay and to your topic. Keep your essay focused. If you try to do too much, it'll just get too convoluted and won't be easy for the readers to understand what you're trying to communicate. One great story about failing at sailing is going to be much more impactful than trying to say all of these different stories that you failed at, and the combination of all of those things helped you become the person that you are. Even if that is true, you might want to de-emphasize all the failures and emphasize one big failure instead. Show, don't tell. You'll hear me talk about that in any kind of creative writing. If I were to tell you the plot points of Deadpool 2, you would not nearly enjoy it nearly as much as if you were to actually watch it. And so that's what the difference is between telling of a story and showing the story. Using imagery, using the types of narrative techniques like dialogue and descriptions and things like that, action type words, in order to show what happens instead of telling what happens. Another example of that could be maybe you come home and your mom is angry, right? If I just say, I came home and my mom is angry, that's me telling you. But if I were to say, I turned the doorknob and cracked open the door to make sure my mom wasn't standing in that front room, I snuck in, and before I was able to get to my bedroom, I heard, Candace, get in here. That's showing the story, right? And so we can discover that Candace's mom is mad at her by how she acts, what she says, that kind of thing. I don't have to tell you that she's mad. And then you really want to end your essay with a thought-provoking conclusion. Maybe challenge, if we go back to the sailing incident, if you challenge the readers to consider their own failures, that's going to be something that is going to stand out to your readers, and they're going to want to read more of what you have to say, and that's going to be something that they're going to remember. Be honest when you're talking about stuff, but also be humble. It's very difficult to write about yourself without sounding conceited or falsely modest. And so that's definitely a skill. And so as long as you're using the other strategies from earlier, this should kind of fall into place. Some sample topics for just things to think about whenever you're writing a personal essay. Think about when your life changed forever, right? Maybe there was a moment that maybe you were in a car accident or something happened that made you change. How you overcame a fear of whatever, right? How a difficult choice made you who you are. Maybe you had to choose to let go of a difficult relationship or something like that. If there were words of wisdom that were given to you that changed your way of thinking. Maybe a failure made you better, like we were talking about with the sailing incident. And any kind of personal transformation can be caused by anything or anyone, any kind of situation. That's just in general. So these are not necessarily things you're always going to write about, but these are going to be things that I want you to think through whenever you're thinking about writing a personal essay, because the more impactful it is, the more memorable it will be. And so if you're writing college admission essays, those are going to be the kind of essays that are going to get you into those better schools.